From people dying on board to those who threaten to jump off. This cat, I swear to God. From people dying on board to people threatening to jump ship, literally. Some crazy things can happen sometimes on cruise ships. I asked my community to share with me their craziest cruise stories, and you all delivered. So I'm gonna share those with you in just a minute. But first, I'm Professor Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. And I'll take a minute to share with you my crazy cruise stories before I jump into what the community said. Now, sadly, it's not uncommon to have passengers die on cruise ships, and I've had it happen not once, not twice, but 3 times that I know of. So sadly, having cruisers die on a sailing is not really all that crazy, nor is it uncommon. So my 2 crazy cruise stories are, the first one happened earlier this year. I was on an MSC cruise on Magnifica. I was on the top deck, getting footage and photos, and my friend who was cruising with me, she looked over and she goes, "I don't think that's supposed to be there." And I looked over, and what do you know, there was a small passenger plane crashed into the waters of Port Miami. It had just happened, the propeller was still spinning, and it was wild to watch this unfold. Now, I'll tell you right now, thankfully, nobody was seriously injured, but seeing a plane right after it crashed, that was pretty wild. And the other is on a Halloween cruise last year. We had a person on board who threatened to jump off the ship, and you absolutely never, even jokingly, threaten to jump off a cruise ship when you're on a cruise ship. That's akin to going on an airplane and saying the B word, just don't do it. And this guy had gotten into a fight with his girl and had made these threats, and she reported that to security, and that's all it took for them to confine him to stateroom jail. So cruise ships do actually have some jail cells on board, but there are certain infractions, I don't know what exactly the criteria are, will get you landed in stateroom jail, where you're confined to your stateroom, and they'll bring you food, of course, but you can't leave. And sadly for this guy, this incident happened on the first night of the cruise. So he was stuck in his room for 5 days, and it was an interior stateroom on an old Carnival ship. Personally, I think I would probably rather be in a real jail. And I say that as someone who loves Carnival. So those are my stories, but let me see what the community had to say. Brad H says, "My ship was out for repair and a crane fell off the ship in dry dock, and that canceled our entire cruise. Devastated." That stinks. It really stinks when a cruise entirely gets canceled. And I know actually there's been a lot of issues lately with Carnival Vista. I've sailed Vista, I love that cruise ship, but they need to figure out what the heck is going on with the propulsion issues, because that bad boy has been in dry dock many times, and they keep bringing it back into service, and cruisers keep getting their cruises either delayed or canceled. And so yeah, that stinks, Brad. So Freedom A1A says, "And one time the ship didn't even leave yet. This guy in the hot tub swallowed a beer cap and had to get off the ship." Yeah, some people just probably shouldn't buy the drink package. Sandra K says, "A huge fight next to us, throwing each other against walls and broke everything in the room." Woo! Willing to say I could probably venture a good bet as to what cruise line you were sailing, Sandra. I'm not gonna say it because I love it, but I'm not gonna say it. You know what I'm talking about. But yeah, huge fights happening. Also not uncommon, especially on certain cruise lines, and that can be wild. That actually happened to me. I was doing a TikTok live on a certain cruise line. I'm not gonna say it. Recently at Sail Away, and I was having lunch in the Lido, and a fight broke out right beside me as I was doing a live. So that was pretty crazy. So those fights, yeah, can definitely shake you up for real. Okay, so this one is a cute and fun, crazy one. He says, "Our first cruise in January 2008, a group of Santas were vacationing together after the holiday season. All dressed in red, they sang Christmas carols at the Atrium Bar one night. Many passengers joined in from the balconies above. It was so fun." Okay, that sounds like a good time, Heather. I would very much love that. That is kind of crazy, but that's the fun kind of crazy, not the bad crazy. I like that kind of crazy. Okay, so Jay Allen, we had someone die on the first night. I have a lot of death stories. So this is an interesting one and is surprisingly not all that uncommon either, but I've had it yet to happen to me. I think it's almost inevitable. But Rarkar says, on the Carnival Vista, I guess the one time it was not canceled because of propulsion issues, in December 2023, rescue at sea of the crew members from a sunken cargo ship. Ooh, that's very dramatic. And I've heard a lot of rescue at sea stories, and not from a sunken cargo ship. That seems extra dramatic, but I've heard a lot of like Cuban migrants that are trying to flee on not great handcrafted rafts, and they get in trouble out to sea, and the cruise ship captain has to basically assist getting them safely on the ship and then to shore. So that seems to happen a lot, but hasn't happened to me yet. Okay, so this one is kind of related to my recent video about unpopular cruise opinions, and we kind of got into the topic of unruly, unsupervised children. But Snizmouse, interesting username, Snizmouse, says, parents had locked 3 kids, all ages 6 and under, out in the hallway at 1 a.m. and I had to go get security. So you got unruly kids and parents that shouldn't be parents. So yeah, I've seen a few instances myself of very bad kids on cruises and security instances where they've had to be called. Okay, so I've had a threatened jumper, but I'm fortunate that I've never actually been on a cruise where there was an actual jumper. But Sergeant Mandy says on Carnival Paradise, it's a nasty old ship, but it was my first, so I always have fondness for it. In 2018, we went through a tropical storm, puked over ship. Okay, Mandy, I didn't need to know that. And a man jumped overboard. Never had a jumper, thank goodness. Because yeah, your odds are not great if you jump off a cruise ship. Even an old, smaller one like Paradise, not good, don't do it. And don't threaten to do it. So another comment, someone had a medical helicopter, a medevac, come in and have to try to rescue someone. Then there was another stateroom jail instance. So that's not uncommon either, apparently. Okay, this one. All right, Lil Appleby. Okay, so this is sad, but then there's a funny twist. Had a man go overboard that passed away. So yeah, that seems to be a recurring theme here. And you go overboard or jump, and it's kind of hard to go overboard accidentally. So usually when someone goes overboard, it's intentional and your odds are not good. But Lil Appleby also watched an 80-year-old his pants with diarrhea on Royal Caribbean and walked through the atrium dripping it along the way. Okay, that is absolutely foul. And the way he phrased that was just humorous to me. But as an empathetic person, I just feel really bad for this old man himself. Charlie Caruso says, we were in the dining room one evening. I noticed something sharp in my mouth. As I spit it out, we were shocked to see it was a large shard of glass. Ooh, that's scary. Regicide. We got another jumper story, but this one with a twist. On our way from Miami to Cozumel, we just happened to be on our balcony and we spotted a man in the water. He had jumped off another cruise ship and had been in the water for over 20 hours. That sounds like some Castaway stuff. Okay, Noped on Utopia of the Seas. Oh, I want to sail Utopia so bad, you guys. But anyway, Utopia of the Seas this past September. So if you were on Utopia this past September, were you this person? A couple was making a baby on the stairs on deck 10 by the elevators. Guess they couldn't make it back to their room, or they just met each other. Okay, I'm all about having a good time, but I don't know about that. This one's really interesting. As we were leaving Port Miami is always a whole vibe, saw many helicopters, police, big gunners. Later found out it was the raid on P. Diddy's house nearby. That is wild and crazy, but like pretty cool. What a story to tell your grandkids. Okay, lots of fights. Why are people on cruises always so angry? I don't get it. Okay, here's another naughty one. Cooper's mom says, my sister and her friend were staying in the room next to my friend and I. She called us over because they could hear the neighbors through the connecting door trying to have a three-way with another guy. Must be the pineapple people. But the guy and the wife were too drunk. It's that dang drink package again. The couple argued about trying to find the Viagra, which I hear you can get cheap in port, by the way. We were all laughing so hard. Okay, that's pretty crazy. My goodness, cruisers are naughty. So Matt says, I like this one. A couple was on their honeymoon and the wife disappeared. Panic ensued. Found her about 30 plus hours later having a three-way while hiding from her husband and the captain. So I guess cruising either makes people irrationally angry or irrationally amorous. This one's really sad. I remember hearing about this. Alan was on Harmony of the Seas. Last night of cruising, a young teen fell from his balcony. Oh my God, that's absolutely terrible. I prefer the naughty stories. Those are the fun kind of crazy. I remember hearing about this one too. Michelle T was on a cruise to Alaska and her ship, this just recently happened, hit an iceberg. Thankfully there was not a Titanic situation, but Yikes. So Greg has a comedy gone wrong story, but Greg says, on my sailing last week on Firenze, is it Firenze or Firenze? I don't know, these Italian ships, they get me. Comedian Mike Steenburg, I've seen him on a Carnival cruise before. Sorry, I have ADHD. Anyway, on Greg's recent sailing on that Italian ship, comedian Mike Steenburg was in the middle of his set when the person in the front row, oh my God, never sit in the front row of a comedy show if you can't handle being roasted, took offense and jumped onto the stage and got into his face. Mike called for security and they weren't coming fast enough, so he pushed the guest off the stage and back into the first row. Drama mama. Darian has a passenger that jumped after his wife caught him with his girlfriend. Like on the ship? Were they all there and they didn't know it? I need more details there, Darian. More Cuban refugees, more medevacs. Jim says, we were at Coco Cay, so Royal Caribbean, and saw some guy get caught smoking a joint. They were taking him back to the ship to get his things and then boat him over to another island to leave him there to find his way home and get banned in the process. Oh, Royal Caribbean cracking down. I gotta say, there's a couple of cruise lines where I sail and I consistently smell the stanky jank. And Royal Caribbean is one of them. I'm not gonna tell you what the other one is. You already know. So it seems like they don't always take that very seriously, but it sounds like sometimes they do. And Amy N says, we were leaving port from Fort Lauderdale in March 23 when all our phones went off with a tornado warning. We ran to our balcony and saw a tornado form and touched down as we were pulling away. It was so surreal. So I've actually cruised now through a couple of hurricanes, and that actually doesn't scare me because the navigation equipment is so excellent and captains are really good at navigating around storms that it doesn't scare me. But tornadoes, that's kind of a whole nother thing. I would probably be like that man who was trailing poo along the atrium on Royal Caribbean if I were to see a sight like that. So anyway, thank you for sharing your crazy cruise stories with me. I would love to hear yours because I find these fascinating, sometimes sad, but often pretty hilarious. So drop down below and let me know your crazy cruise stories. And if you like this type of content, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And as always, visit my website, profmelissa.com, for all kinds of great free cruise information, including free port guides, tips, advice, and so much more. Happy sailing.